So it's up to me to say that the emperor has no clothes. And my favorite motto is that old saying, in the news there is no truth, and in the truth there is no news. What we should have known all along is the elephant under the carpet that we need to pay attention to now. So in the fall of 1960, when I started, I called myself a philosopher and filmmaker, and I was a graduate student. And I believe I was the first to envision literature on screens. I believe I was the first to envision worldwide screen publishing by individuals, members of the public. And I believe I was the first to envision a personal software industry, and more. All this is poignantly told in my new autobiography called Possiplex, which you can get right now from lulu.com. In an unknowable number of weeks, you'll be able to get it from Amazon. I'd rather you get it from Lulu because I make $10 from Lulu and $2.80 from Amazon, but that's it. So starting in 1960, it was easy to invent your own computer world because there were no constraints and there was no received wisdom. There was only the realm of possibility. But now the public is totally mystified, and so we try to satisfy them with AI techniques. And I'm always hearing about people who want to build interfaces that will be talking rabbits or something, so-called talking agents, to keep you from having to know anything. See, when people talk about intelligent software, what does it mean? Intelligent software means it takes control away from the user. I personally want to control my software, and I'm not interested in trying to converse with a fictitious object in order to divine how that fictitious object actually works, in order to figure out what instructions to give it to make it do what I want. I'd much rather use a mouse, thank you. So, the worst problem right now is the myth of technology. Now, technology exists, but most of the things people call technology are not technology. They are packages and conventions and constructs, okay? So, is email technology? No. It's packages and conventions. What's the technology? TCP/IP and file transfer, okay? And then a few conventions about the fields. Then of course, to support this conceptual structure, you have IMAP and all the rest, but the main thing is that those conventions came first. What is Windows and the Macintosh? Packaging around the same thing. Windows, Macintosh, Linux. A lot of people don't like me saying this, but they're all the same. We'll get back to that. The World Wide Web, packages and conventions. Now, we should be able to ask, what conventions do we choose? But the way we only vote with our feet over the conventions that are presented to us by a combination of venture capitalists and nutty graduate students and whoever else builds software. But let's talk about something of great concern to me and to you, documents. What conventions should we have there? Now, in the Middle Ages, they had marginal glosses, writing in the margins. In the 19th century, there were books that had summaries in the margin. And you, on your very own book or printout, can write in the margin. Why is it that in Microsoft Word and PDF and HTML, you can't show something, you can't put text in the margin? Well, the simple answer is the formats don't allow it. Why don't the formats allow it? Because Chuck Simone and John Warnock and Tim Berners-Lee didn't think you needed it. It comes down to personalities. It comes down to outlook. They got their grand successes without it, so you don't need it. Well, excuse me, I need it. And so, for the last 50 years, I have been engaged in trying to build an entirely different kind of digital document, one which generalizes the marginal gloss, generalizes it into connected pages side by side, so that you can actually see side by side ribbons of connection from one page to the next, to the next, to the next. And that's what I want to write. That's how I want to store my information. I don't want to write separate pages that show no connection. And the inane one-way jumps of the web are virtually useless. And by the way, I was on a project where that convention was, to my everlasting regret, established at Brown University. The people say, well, you claim to be a software designer. What software have you designed? Aside from a few things that worked very well in the early 70s, there's only one, I've designed only one piece of software that's widely deployed, and you're all quite familiar with it. It's called the back button. We were at Brown and they were saying, well, you know, if you've jumped to this other page, how can the user stay oriented? And I said, well, simple, keep the addresses on a stack and give the user a back button. And they said, no, that won't work. So we argued a few hours, and they finally did it, and there it is. It worked, but it shouldn't have to work that way because you shouldn't have to jump that way. Okay, so the generalization of documents which I propose is entirely different from any documents you're able to see at the present time. My project Xanadu has had several political failures, and we're now on a new prototype. We have, in 3D, a number of different pages side by side with visible ribbons of connection. So these are links and transclusions. We have two types of connection in Xanadu structures. The link, which is a connection between things which are different, and the transclusion, which is a connection between things which are the same. The convention of files. They say the fish don't see the water. Computer scientists don't see the metaphysical assumptions that rule their world. The computer world is based on imposing hierarchy and rectangularity and sequence on everything. The notion that everything is truly hierarchical deep down, they say that if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you insist on hierarchy, then you only see hierarchy. But where are the connections? It is representing connection that is the real issue on every front. Files, how did they begin? Once upon a time, you had punch cards in a box, and you put the name of the punch card set on the end of the box, and that was the proto-file. Then they started keeping these things on tape, and you'd have several files on a tape, and you'd say, how will we keep track of what's on the tape? Let's have a file that's the name of all the files. Thus was born hierarchical directories, which no one has questioned since. These were perfected with Unix, they had previously had various levels of hierarchy, but with Unix they perfected it to, in principle, infinite hierarchy, and everyone believed that this was the right thing, especially since Bell Lab programmers liked it. Now you see, a Bell Labs programmer has the job of doing some kind of a program and setting the files in particular places to work with that particular program. That will be fine for several years of work. But no one foresaw in the creation of this hierarchical world a time when you and I would be saving photos and documents and pictures and audio that are deeply interconnected in every possible direction. How do you divide them up into directories? Well, because we believe that the intrinsic cosmology of the computer is hierarchical. We do not question this terrible premise. And that means that we have to cram more and more into the file names, because that's the only kind of information on the file that we can count on being permanent. Now, we have these committees worried about metadata. What is metadata? In my systems, there's no distinction between data and metadata. What is metadata? A file consists of a lump payload and a name. So the lump payload is thought to be the center, and the name is outside that. I wonder at first, when I first got a personal computer, when I lengthen the name of the file, why doesn't the length of the file name change? And the answer was, because the length of the file is the payload only. So since you have this dichotomy between payload and name, what is metadata? It's everything else you want to know about the file. Where do you put it? Well, of course we'll make special fields for them. And that means we have all these committees deciding what is the official metadata, so it can't change, can't be fixed. Okay, are we going? All right, good. I'll just hope to start this up. So what is the alternative? No. Huh? The alternative is the representation of all structure deeply interconnected. Structure at every level inside the lumps. In fact, why have the lumps? Why not kibble it into tiny pieces which are maintained individually? So that gives us the system of interconnection I call hyperorthogonal structure. Now, because of the foul-ups with computers, I'm afraid I can't give you that demo. I'm going to jump to the main one, which is around here someplace. Sorry, guys, I didn't know I was going to have to fall back on this poor guy. No, because I have an emergency dental appointment in 20 minutes. That is why they moved me forward. Pardon? 1:30. Okay, well, we can look at Zigzag after this, if you like. Okay. Sorry, this is the worst. Okay. Back to documents. What is the history of electronic documents? 1951, 1945, of course, you had Van Nevar Bush, that's the correct pronunciation of his name, Van Nevar Bush, and his article called As We May Think, which postulated a magical device called a Memex, which would, by microfilm, maintain all kinds of documentary records, and users would be able to put in links. He called them trails. But what no one has noticed is that they weren't links, they were transclusions. And I don't have any time to put on that right now. Again, a link is a connection between things which are different. A transclusion is a connection between things which are the same. Okay, in 1960 I started the Xanadu project, whose objective was to improve on paper. How do we improve on paper? Obviously by showing and representing the connections that every writer wants to have. What is a parenthesis but a thought trying to wriggle free off the page? What is a footnote but an errant thought that wants to tiptoe away and hang out? Where should a footnote be? Some people argue that it should be at the bottom of a page. Some people argue that it should be at the end of the chapter. It should be on the side. We should have documents which are side by side by side. However, in 1974 came something called Xerox Palo Alto Research Center. And while I naturally respect many of the things they did, I also think they did some terrible things which everyone has celebrated as triumphs. on the Alto computer, they had all kinds of fonts, and that was hypnotic. It was beautiful. It was candy. And what did we lose? Structure. Engelbart's NLS system had overlay links, which our group evolved independently. Overlay links not embedded, but on the side, which allowed the content to be approached cleanly. And then then at Xerox PARC, instead they went for fonts. So Chuck Simoni had the Bravo project with fonts and took it away, and it became Microsoft Word. And John Warnock at Xerox PARC created the Interpress project for printing, and then he took it away and started Adobe, and now we have PDF. So what did they do with the computer? They imitated paper. They imitated paper. They didn't try to improve on it. That's like tearing the wings off a 747 and driving it on the highway as a bus. So the cult of fonts has absorbed the world, and we have lost structure, except for the trivial jumps of the World Wide Web. So what is the alternative? The alternative is connection. Let's see if we found anything here. Yes. Oh, thank God. I'm sorry, you're going to see this. Your machine didn't work. We're going to look at this for 5 minutes. Yeah. Okay. Control Alt Function F5 maybe. Yeah. All right. Here we have 2 pages on the screen. This is the current page, and this is the companion page. And we're highlighting one connection, the current connection. There should be a better, this is a prototype, there should be a better marker on it, so that this phrase, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, and in the earth was without form and void, is from King James Bible, the creation. So one of the things we always wanted was to have every connection, every quotation connected to its original source, and here you see it, simulated. So here on the King James Bible is the original source. Now we are looking at a hypertext of 11 pages, and again, the reason for going for a better machine is that it wouldn't be so jerky, but we're looking at a hypertext of 11 pages in 3-dimensional space, shown by OpenGL. Those stripes are also an artifact of this computer. But as we step from one current connection to the next, we watch you would see it more smoothly on a better machine. We watch the pages swoop up to place the current connection where it should be. So this is the kind of document I want to write, where you can actually show connections in parallel. Parallelism, what do you want parallelism for? Well, how about footnotes? How about comments? How about outlines? So you have the outline on the left, and the headings transclude through to the other things that follow that same outline. You have multiple things following the same outline, not like winding the outline into the structure. So that's essentially all I can tell you today. This document structure is now not, it was originally going to be what is now the World Wide Web. If you read Tim Berners-Lee's book, Weaving the Web, he has a backhanded compliment to the Xanadu project on page 5, showing he didn't understand it. But Tim is a great guy as a human being. Meanwhile, we continue on this entirely different path. So Xanadu, rather than being an attempt to create a worldwide library or an application, is now essentially an attempt to create an Uber format for the interconnection of portions of data of all kinds, so that you'll be able to link and transclude between web pages, PDFs, Microsoft Word, text files, and ever-extending parallel documents. And I thank you.